The moment Owen Fletcher spotted the woman sitting alone on the chapel steps in the fading light of that spring evening in 1876, his heart lurched with a recognition he could not name, as though his soul had been waiting for this exact moment, his entire 30 years of life. He had ridden into Utica, Montana territory with no intention beyond picking up supplies and heading back to his ranch before nightfall. The small town nestled in the valley had always been quiet, the kind of place where nothing much happened beyond the occasional Saturday night celebration or Sunday morning worship. But there she was, dressed in what should have been wedding finery now dusty and crumpled, her dark hair falling loose from its pins, her face turned toward the setting sun with an expression of such profound loneliness that Owen felt it echo in his own chest. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the dirt road with a soft thud. His horse, a reliable mare named Copper, nickered softly as he tied her to the hitching post outside the general store. The woman had not moved, had not even seemed to notice his arrival. Owen approached cautiously, the way he might approach a wounded animal, with respect and gentleness. "Miss," he called out when he was close enough that his voice would carry without startling her. "Are you all right?" She turned then, and Owen saw her face fully for the first time. She was beautiful in a way that made his breath catch. Not the delicate beauty of a china doll, but something stronger, more substantial. Her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight, and they held a depth of sorrow that made him want to fix whatever had broken her. "I suppose that depends on your definition of all right," she said, and her voice was steady despite the tear tracks that marked her cheeks. "I have been abandoned by the man I was meant to marry. I have nowhere to go and no money to get there if I did. But I am breathing, and the sun is still warm, so perhaps in some ways I am more than all right. Perhaps I am free." Owen removed his hat, a gesture of respect his mother had drilled into him before she passed. "My name is Owen Fletcher. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. If you need help, I would be honored to provide it." The woman studied him for a long moment, and Owen felt the weight of her assessment. He was tall and broad from years of ranch work, his face weathered by sun and wind, his hands calloused but clean. He knew he was not handsome in a conventional sense, but he hoped his eyes showed the honesty he felt. "My name is Zelda Fairmont," she said finally. "And I am not certain what help you could possibly provide, Mr. Fletcher, unless you happen to know of a respectable position for a woman with no references and no skills beyond embroidery and French." "I might know of something," Owen said, surprising himself with the words even as they left his mouth. "But first, would you allow me to buy you supper? You look as though you have not eaten today." Zelda stood, and Owen realized she was taller than he had expected, with a straight spine and proud shoulders despite her circumstances. "I should not accept. It would not be proper. Forgive me for saying so, Miss Fairmont, but I think propriety left the building when your intended did." A smile flickered across her face, brief but genuine. "You make an excellent point, Mr. Fletcher. I accept your offer, though I warn you I have quite an appetite when I am distressed." The town's only restaurant was a modest establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, who had come west with her late husband during the railroad construction. She took one look at Zelda's disheveled wedding dress and Owen's concerned expression, and seated them in the back corner without a word, bringing hot coffee and fresh bread while they decided on their order. "Tell me what happened," Owen said gently. "Only if you want to, of course." Zelda wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, seeming to draw warmth and courage from it. "His name was Richard Chambers. We met in St. Louis, where I lived with my aunt after my parents died. He was charming and well-spoken, and when he proposed after a 3-month courtship, I said yes. He told me he had business interests here in Montana Territory, that we would build a life together. We traveled for 2 weeks to get here, properly chaperoned by his sister, or at least by the woman he said was his sister. She paused to sip her coffee, and Owen waited patiently. This morning, we were meant to be married at the chapel. I woke in the boarding house to find both Richard and his sister gone. The landlady informed me rather coldly that my room had been paid for only through last night, and that I should gather my things and leave. When I went to the chapel, hoping there had been some misunderstanding, I found the preacher just as confused as I was. Richard had paid him in advance for the ceremony, so at least the good reverend believed my story. He allowed me to sit in the chapel while I determined what to do next. "What a coward," Owen said, and the anger in his voice surprised even himself. "What kind of man abandons a woman in a strange place with no resources or protection?" "The kind who likely never intended to marry me at all," Zelda said, and her voice was bitter now. "I have been thinking about it all day. He was always vague about his business interests. The sister never spoke much, never engaged with me beyond superficial pleasantries. I think perhaps I was part of some scheme, though what purpose I could have served I cannot fathom. Perhaps simply to make him appear respectable during his travels. Perhaps something worse that never came to fruition." Mrs. Chen returned with plates of beef stew and fresh vegetables, and they ate in silence for a few minutes. Owen watched Zelda as discreetly as he could, noting how she ate with practiced grace despite her hunger, how she thanked Mrs. Chen with genuine warmth, how her eyes constantly moved as though cataloging her surroundings and options. "I have a proposition," Owen said when their plates were nearly empty. "It may sound strange, but hear me out." Zelda set down her fork and looked at him directly. "I am listening. I have a ranch. It is not large, but it is profitable enough. I raise cattle and horses, and I have good water and grassland. What I do not have is a wife, and at 30 years old, I am beginning to feel the loneliness of that quite acutely." He took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would sound insane. "You need security and a home." "I need a partner in life. The preacher is already expecting a wedding today and he has been paid. What if we simply went ahead with it?" Zelda stared at him, her honey-colored eyes wide. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. I know it sounds mad. We have known each other less than an hour. But consider the practical aspects. You would have a home, protection, and a name. I would have companionship and help with the ranch. We could get to know each other as we go, build something real from this strange beginning." "You know nothing about me," Zelda said, but her voice was uncertain rather than dismissive. "I could be a terrible person. I could be lazy or cruel or dishonest." "Could be," Owen acknowledged, "but I do not think you are any of those things. I think you are a woman who has been dealt a bad hand through no fault of her own, and I think you are brave enough to sit on those chapel steps watching the sun set instead of falling apart. That tells me more than any reference letter could. Why would you do this?" Zelda asked, and her voice was almost a whisper. "There must be women in this territory who would marry you, women you could court properly." Owen considered the question carefully. How could he explain that from the moment he saw her on those steps, something had shifted in him? That he had been alone since his parents died 5 years ago, keeping to his ranch and his work, letting life pass him by because nothing had seemed worth reaching for. That looking at her made him want to reach again. "Because I think maybe we could save each other," he said finally. "Because I am tired of being lonely, and because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what that feels like. Because life is short and hard out here, and sometimes you have to take a chance when it is offered." Zelda was quiet for so long that Owen began to think he had made a terrible mistake, that he had frightened her or offended her with his presumption. Then she nodded slowly, a decision settling over her features. "All right," she said. "All right, Mr. Fletcher, I will marry you today. But I have conditions. Name them. I will work to earn my place. I will learn whatever I need to learn to be useful on your ranch. I will be a true partner, not a burden. And while I understand that marriage comes with certain expectations, I ask for your patience and kindness as we learn to know one another." Owen felt relief and joy surge through him. "Those are all terms I can easily agree to, Miss Fairmont, and I will add a condition of my own. You can leave at any time if you find you cannot bear it. I will not hold you against your will. I will help you get wherever you want to go with enough money to start fresh." "That is more than fair," Zelda said. "Though I warn you, Mr. Fletcher, I am not in the habit of quitting." They stood together, and Owen left money on the table for Mrs. Chen. Outside, the sun had fully set, and the first stars were appearing in the vast Montana sky. The chapel was just visible down the street, lamplight glowing warm in its windows. "Should we do this now?" Zelda asked, and Owen heard the tremor in her voice. "If you are ready," he said. "The preacher lives behind the chapel. He will be there." They walked side by side down the dusty street, not touching but somehow connected by the strange gravity of what they were about to do. Owen's heart pounded in his chest, and he wondered if he had lost his mind. Then, Zelda stumbled slightly on a rut in the road, and he reached out instinctively to steady her, and when his hand touched her arm, he felt the rightness of it all the way to his bones. Reverend Samuel Hutchins answered their knock with a confused expression that shifted to surprise when he saw Zelda and Owen together. He was an older man, thin and weathered, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Miss Fairmont," he said, "I had quite given up on seeing you married today. Is this gentleman your missing groom?" "No, Reverend," Zelda said with remarkable composure. "This is Owen Fletcher, and he is a much better man than the one who left me on your steps. We would like to be married tonight if you are willing to perform the ceremony." Reverend Hutchins looked between them, and Owen could see him taking measure of the situation. "This is highly irregular. You two know each other." "We met an hour ago," Owen said honestly. "I know how it sounds, Reverend. But I give you my word that I will honor this marriage and treat Miss Fairmont with the respect and care she deserves. This is not a joke or a lark. This is two people trying to build something good out of difficult circumstances." The Reverend was quiet for a moment, then he nodded slowly. "I have been in this territory long enough to know that life does not always follow conventional paths, and Miss Fairmont has been through enough today without me adding judgment to her troubles. Come inside." The chapel was simple, with wooden pews and a plain cross at the front. Candles burned on the altar, their light soft and golden. Reverend Hutchins gestured for them to stand before him, and Owen and Zelda took their places side by side. "We should have witnesses," the Reverend said. "Wait here a moment." He disappeared through a side door and returned shortly with his wife, a plump woman with gray hair and a curious expression, and the church's caretaker, an elderly man named Henry who had been sweeping the front steps. "This will have to do," Reverend Hutchins said. "Now join hands." Owen turned to Zelda and took her hands in his. They were smaller than his work-roughened ones, but strong and steady. She looked up at him, and in the candlelight her eyes held hope and fear and determination all at once. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Hutchins began, and the familiar words washed over them. Owen barely heard them, focused entirely on the woman before him, on the promise he was about to make and his determination to keep it. When the Reverend asked if he would take Zelda to be his lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death parted them, Owen said, "I do," with his whole heart. Zelda's voice was quieter but no less firm when she made her own vows. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Hutchins said. "Owen, you may kiss your bride." Owen had not thought this far ahead. He looked at Zelda, saw her nervousness, and made a quick decision. He leaned forward and placed a gentle, brief kiss on her forehead, chaste and respectful. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Fletcher," he said softly. Relief and something else, something warmer, flickered in her expression. "Thank you, Mr. Fletcher." They signed the marriage certificate with Mrs. Hutchins and Henry adding their signatures as witnesses. Reverend Hutchins shook both their hands and offered his congratulations and blessings. When they stepped back out into the night air, they were legally married, bound together by law and God and their own desperate hope. "I have a room at the boarding house," Owen said. "It is clean and respectable. You can stay there tonight and we will head to the ranch at first light." "What about you?" Zelda asked. "Where will you stay?" "There is a stable where I can bed down with Copper. It will not be the first time." "Owen," she said, and it was the first time she had used his given name. It sounded right in her voice. "We are married now. I will not send my husband to sleep in a stable on our wedding night. We can share the room. I trust you to be a gentleman." The room was small but clean, with a single bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. Owen carried in Zelda's small trunk, which held everything she owned in the world now, and his own travel pack. They stood awkwardly in the confined space, suddenly feeling the strangeness of their situation. "You take the bed," Owen said. "I will make a pallet on the floor. That hardly seems fair." "It is our wedding night," Owen said with a slight smile. Fairness was not really part of the bargain. Zelda laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh he had heard from her. "I suppose you are right. Very well, Mr. Fletcher. The bed is mine by husbandly decree." There was a screen in the corner where Zelda could change in privacy. Owen turned his back anyway, giving her additional modesty, and made himself busy arranging blankets on the floor. When she emerged in a simple nightgown with her dark hair braided over one shoulder, she looked younger and more vulnerable than before. "I must look a fright," she said, self-consciously touching her hair. "You look lovely," Owen said honestly, then cleared his throat, suddenly feeling awkward. "I mean you look comfortable, ready for sleep, which is good because it has been a long day." Zelda climbed into the bed and pulled the quilt up to her chin. Owen blew out the lamp and settled onto his floor pallet. The room fell into darkness, broken only by the moonlight through the window. "Owen," Zelda's voice came softly through the dark. "Yes, thank you for being kind. For offering me a way forward when I had none. I know this is strange for you two, and I appreciate your patience." "You are welcome, Zelda, and I should thank you too, for taking a chance on a lonely rancher you just met, for agreeing to this mad scheme. I will do everything I can to make sure you never regret it." "I believe you," she said, and then, after a pause, "Good night, husband." "Good night, wife." Owen lay awake long after Zelda's breathing had evened into sleep, thinking about the turn his life had taken. 12 hours ago he had been a solitary man with simple plans. Now he was a husband, responsible for another person's happiness and well-being. It should have terrified him, but instead he felt energized, purposeful in a way he had not felt in years. Morning came bright and clear. Owen woke to find Zelda already up and dressed in a simple traveling outfit she had pulled from her trunk. She had pinned her hair up neatly and looked ready for whatever came next. "I woke the landlady and borrowed her kitchen to make breakfast," Zelda said. "There are eggs and bacon and coffee. I hope you are hungry." Owen was starving and the food was surprisingly good. "You said you had no skills beyond embroidery and French," he said between bites. "I think you may have understated your abilities. I may have been feeling sorry for myself." Zelda admitted. I can cook adequately, and I can keep a house clean, and I can read and write and do figures. I simply have never done any of those things for money or in a professional capacity. Then you are already better qualified than me for half the ranch work, Owen said. I can handle animals and mend fences and track weather, but my cooking is atrocious, and my record keeping is worse. After breakfast, Owen settled his account with the landlady while Zelda gathered her things. They loaded her trunk onto Copper, and Owen helped Zelda mount behind him. She hesitated before putting her arms around his waist, then did so with growing confidence. Hold tight, Owen said. It is a good ride to the ranch and the road can be rough. They left Utica as the town was waking up, riding north through rolling grassland dotted with early wildflowers. The morning was cool but promised warmth, and the sky stretched endlessly blue above them. Zelda was quiet behind him, but Owen could feel her looking around, taking in the landscape that would be her new home. It is beautiful here, she said after a while. So much space, so much sky. It can feel lonely sometimes, Owen admitted. Especially in winter when you can go weeks without seeing another soul. But it can also feel like freedom, like you have room to breathe and be yourself without the world pressing in on you. I think I could use some freedom, Zelda said softly. They rode for nearly 3 hours, stopping once to rest Copper and stretch their legs. Zelda walked a short distance away, looking out over a valley where a creek wound through stands of cottonwood trees. Owen watched her and wondered what she was thinking, whether she was regretting her hasty decision. "This is all yours," she asked, gesturing at the land around them. "Most of what you can see from here, yes. I inherited the original claim from my father. He and my mother homesteaded here back in '67, built it up from nothing. When they passed, it came to me. I have expanded it some since then, bought up neighboring claims when I could." "They would be proud of you," Zelda said, "for keeping it going, for making it prosper." "I hope so," Owen said. "Though I think my mother would have scolded me for waiting so long to marry. She always said a ranch needed a family to make it a true home. Well, now you have a wife at least. That is a start." They continued on, and finally Owen pointed ahead to where buildings were visible near a stand of pine trees. "There. That is home." The ranch house was solidly built from logs, with a covered porch and stone chimney. It was not large, but it looked well maintained and welcoming. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, a chicken coop, and various outbuildings. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney, indicating Owen's ranch hands were in residence. As they rode into the yard, 2 men emerged from the barn. One was young, probably no more than 20, with sandy hair and a lean build. The other was older, perhaps 50, with graying hair and a weathered face. Both stopped and stared openly at Zelda. Owen dismounted and helped Zelda down, keeping his hand at her elbow in a gesture that was both supportive and proprietary. "Tom, Jack, I would like you to meet my wife, Zelda Fletcher. We were married yesterday in Utica." The 2 men looked stunned. The older one, Tom, recovered first and swept off his hat. "Mrs. Fletcher, it is an honor to meet you. Please forgive our surprise. Owen did not mention he was courting anyone." "He was not," Zelda said with admirable composure. "Our marriage was somewhat sudden. But I am very happy to be here, and I look forward to getting to know you both." Jack, the younger man, managed to close his mouth and also removed his hat. "Welcome, madam. If there is anything you need, anything at all, you just say the word." "Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that kindness." Owen gave the men a look that promised explanations later and guided Zelda toward the house. Inside, it was clearly a bachelor's domain, clean but sparse, with minimal decoration and a utilitarian feel. The main room held a large fireplace, a solid table with chairs, and some worn furniture. Doorways led to what appeared to be a bedroom, a smaller room that might be an office, and a kitchen. "It is not much," Owen said, suddenly seeing the place through Zelda's eyes and finding it wanting. "But it is sturdy and warm and paid for. You can change anything you like, add whatever makes you comfortable." Zelda walked through the room slowly, her fingers trailing over surfaces, her expression thoughtful. In the bedroom, there was a large bed frame with a good mattress, a wardrobe, and a dresser. The window looked out over the valley they had seen on their ride. "The view alone is worth the journey," she said. "And Owen, truly, it is a fine house. I have lived in much worse, and most of those places never felt like home. Perhaps this one will." They spent the rest of the day settling Zelda in. Owen brought her trunk to the bedroom and cleared space in the wardrobe for her things. Tom's wife, Martha, who lived in a small house on the far edge of the property, came by in the afternoon with a basket of food and offers of help. She was a practical woman in her 40s with kind eyes and capable hands. "I know this must all be overwhelming," Martha said to Zelda when the men had gone outside to tend to ranch business. "If you need advice about anything, about the house or the area, or managing ranch hands, or managing that stubborn husband of yours, you come find me. It is not easy being out here, especially if you are not used to it, but it is easier with friends." "Thank you," Zelda said, and her gratitude was genuine. "I confess I am somewhat at sea. Yesterday at this time I thought I was marrying a completely different man in completely different circumstances. Today I am a ranch wife in Montana Territory, and I am not entirely certain how to proceed." "One day at a time," Martha said wisely. "And from what Tom tells me, Owen is a good man, patient and fair. You could have done much worse." "I am beginning to see that," Zelda agreed. That evening, Zelda insisted on making dinner. She found Owen's kitchen reasonably well supplied and produced a meal of fried chicken, biscuits, and greens that had the men eating with stunned appreciation. "If I had known marriage came with food like this," Tom said around a mouthful of biscuit, "I would have convinced you to find a wife years ago." "The food is just a bonus," Owen said, looking at Zelda with warmth. "The company is the real benefit." After dinner, Tom and Jack returned to the bunkhouse, and Owen and Zelda were left alone in the house. It was only their second evening together, but already there was a sense of routine forming. Zelda washed the dishes while Owen dried and put them away. They worked in comfortable silence, their movements gradually synchronizing. "I have been thinking," Zelda said as she scrubbed a pot. "I want to be useful here. I want to contribute. What needs doing that I could learn?" Owen considered. "The chickens need tending. Someone has to collect eggs and feed them and make sure the coop stays clean. The garden needs planting, now that the weather has warmed. It is late in the season, but we could still get good growth. And there is the house itself. Keeping it clean and organized, managing supplies, that sort of thing. Beyond that, if you are interested, I could teach you about the horses. We breed them as well as the cattle, and there is always work to be done there." "I would like that," Zelda said. "All of it. I have always wanted to learn about horses, but it was not considered appropriate for a young lady in St. Louis." "Well, you are a ranch wife now," Owen said. "Out here, appropriate is whatever gets the work done and keeps you safe." That night they again prepared for bed with careful modesty. Owen had made up the pallet on the floor again, but Zelda stopped him. "This is foolish," she said. "The bed is large enough for 2 people, and you will hurt your back sleeping on the floor. We are married adults, Owen. I trust you, and I hope you trust me. Let us share the bed and be sensible about it." Owen hesitated, then nodded. "If you are sure, I will not presume anything, Zelda. You have my word." "I know," she said simply. They lay in the darkness on opposite sides of the bed, a respectful distance between them, both acutely aware of the other's presence. Owen could smell the lavender soap Zelda had used to wash her face, could hear her breathing in the quiet. "Tell me about your parents," Zelda said softly. "What were they like?" Owen smiled in the dark. "My father was stern but fair. He worked harder than anyone I have ever known, and he taught me everything about ranching. My mother was the warmth in the house. She sang while she worked, and she made everything feel like home. She died first 6 years ago, pneumonia. My father only lasted another year after that. I think his heart broke when she died. That must have been so hard. I am sorry." "What about your parents?" "I barely remember them," Zelda admitted. "They died when I was very young, and I went to live with my mother's sister in St. Louis. My aunt was not unkind, but she was not warm either. She fed me and clothed me and educated me because it was her duty, but there was never much affection. When Richard proposed, she seemed relieved to have me off her hands." "She sounds like a fool," Owen said bluntly. "Any family would be lucky to have you." In the darkness, he felt Zelda's hand find his. She squeezed his fingers gently. "Thank you for that," she whispered. They fell asleep that way, hands clasped between them, and when Owen woke in the gray dawn, he found they had shifted in the night. Zelda was curled against his side, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. He stayed very still, not wanting to wake her, marveling at how natural it felt to have her there. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Zelda threw herself into ranch life with determination and surprising aptitude. She took over the chickens and the garden with Martha's guidance, and within days had established an efficient routine. She reorganized the kitchen, made curtains for the windows, and began keeping careful records of supplies and expenses. More than that, she began learning about the horses. Owen started her with the gentlest mare in the stable, teaching her how to approach, how to brush and care for the animal, how to read its body language and mood. Zelda proved a natural, patient and calm with the horses, who responded to her with trust. "You have good instincts," Owen told her one afternoon as they stood in the corral watching a young colt run circles around its mother. "Some people are afraid of animals this size, or they try to dominate them. You do neither. You respect them. They are beautiful creatures," Zelda said. "Powerful but gentle if you treat them right. I like that about them." Owen found himself watching her more and more, noticing small things. The way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, the way she laughed at Tom's terrible jokes, the way she hummed while she worked in the garden, the way she looked in the morning light, sleep soft and unguarded. He was falling in love with his wife. The realization came to him one evening about 6 weeks into their marriage. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the valley. Zelda was mending one of his shirts, her needle flashing in the fading light. She looked up and caught him staring and smiled. "What is it?" she asked. "Do I have dirt on my face?" "No," Owen said. "I was just thinking how glad I am that you were sitting on those chapel steps that day." Zelda set down her mending and looked at him seriously. "Owen, I need to tell you something. I have been happy here. Happier than I have been in longer than I can remember. You have been so patient and kind with me, never pushing, always respectful. And I want you to know that I am beginning to feel things for you. Real things. This is not just gratitude or convenience anymore." Owen's heart hammered in his chest. "I am glad to hear it because I have been feeling the same way. Zelda, I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the first moment I saw you. I know it sounds impossible, but it is true." "It does not sound impossible," Zelda said softly, "because I am falling in love with you too." Owen reached for her hand, and this time when he leaned in to kiss her, it was not the chaste kiss of their wedding night. It was deep and real and full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I think," Zelda said, her voice unsteady, "that tonight we might not need quite so much space in that big bed." Owen laughed and kissed her again. "Mrs. Fletcher, I think you might be right. That night marked a true beginning for them." Their marriage became real in every sense, and the connection they had been building over weeks deepened into something profound and unshakable. Owen had never imagined he could feel this way about another person, this sense of completion and rightness. Zelda made him laugh, challenged him to think differently, worked beside him without complaint, and loved him with an openness that took his breath away. The summer passed in a blur of work and discovery. The cattle thrived, the horses flourished, and the garden produced abundantly. Tom and Jack had long since accepted Zelda as part of the ranch family, and Martha had become a true friend. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both productive and joyful. But in late August, trouble arrived in the form of a stranger on a tired horse. Owen was working in the barn when he heard the rider approach, and something in the way Zelda's voice went tight when she greeted the man made him hurry outside. The stranger was well dressed, with cold eyes and a calculating expression. He had dismounted and was standing too close to Zelda, who had taken a step back toward the house. "Can I help you?" Owen called out, his tone making it clear the man should back away from his wife. The stranger turned, and his smile was unpleasant. "You must be the rancher who married Zelda so suddenly. My name is Samuel Chambers. Richard Chambers was my brother." Owen moved to stand beside Zelda, his presence protective. "What do you want?" "To rectify a wrong," Samuel said smoothly. "You see, my brother was engaged to Miss Fairmont." That engagement was a legally binding contract. By marrying another man, she broke that contract and caused my family significant embarrassment and financial loss. I have come to collect compensation. "Your brother abandoned me," Zelda said, her voice shaking with anger rather than fear. "He left me alone in a strange town with no money and no resources. There was no contract, and even if there had been, his actions voided it." "That is not how the law sees it," Samuel said, "and I have a lawyer in Utica who agrees with me." "You owe my family $5,000 for breach of contract, Miss Fairmont." "It is Mrs. Fletcher," Owen said coldly, "and you will not get a single penny from us. Your brother is a coward, and apparently you are a con man. Get off my property." Samuel's expression hardened. "I am trying to settle this civilly. If you refuse, I will take you to court, and I assure you the judgment will be much higher once legal fees are included. $5,000 is a bargain. Or you could admit that this is an extortion scheme, that your brother likely has done this to multiple women, and that you have no legal standing whatsoever," Zelda said. "Leave now, Mr. Chambers, before my husband loses his patience." Samuel looked between them, perhaps reading something in Owen's stance or expression that warned him not to push further. "You have not heard the last of this," he said. "I will be back with the sheriff and a warrant." He rode away, and Owen immediately pulled Zelda into his arms. She was shaking, and he held her tightly until she steadied. "He cannot really take us to court, can he?" she asked. "There was no written contract. Richard simply proposed and I accepted, that is all." "I do not know," Owen admitted, "but I know a good lawyer in Helena. We will send for him immediately and find out exactly where we stand. I will not let them intimidate you, Zelda. We will fight this together." They sent Tom to town that afternoon to telegraph the lawyer in Helena. While they waited for a response, the ranch felt tense, the joy of the past months shadowed by worry. But Owen noticed that rather than driving them apart, the threat pulled them closer together. Zelda seemed more determined than ever, and her anger at the Chambers brothers burned bright and fierce. The lawyer, A sharp man named Jonathan Whitmore arrived 3 days later. He listened to their story carefully, asked detailed questions, and finally sat back with a satisfied expression. "They have no case," he said firmly. "None whatsoever. Breach of promise suits do exist, but they require proof of an actual agreement, usually a written one, and they require the plaintiff to prove they acted in good faith. A man who abandons his fiancée on their wedding day has clearly not acted in good faith. Moreover, Mrs. Fletcher married you in good faith, believing herself released from any obligation. No court in this territory would rule against you." Relief flooded through Owen. "So we just ignore them?" "Not quite," Whitmore said. "If they are foolish enough to file suit, we will need to respond. But I suspect once Samuel Chambers realizes you have legal representation, he will disappear just as quickly as his brother did. These men are predators who target vulnerable women. They do not hold up well under scrutiny." Whitmore was proved right. A week later, Tom reported that Samuel Chambers had left Utica abruptly, and the lawyer he had mentioned refused to comment on the situation. The threat evaporated as quickly as it had appeared, and life on the ranch returned to normal. But something had shifted. Facing the threat together had forged Owen and Zelda's bond even stronger. They talked more openly now about their hopes and fears, their past wounds and future dreams. Zelda told Owen about the loneliness of growing up without parents, about feeling like a burden on her aunt, about her fear that she was unlovable. Owen shared his own loneliness after his parents died, his fear that he would never build the family his mother had wanted for him, his certainty that he had somehow failed by being alone for so long. "You did not fail," Zelda told him fiercely. "You were waiting. We both were. Waiting for each other." "I believe that," Owen said. "And I am grateful every single day that I rode into Utica that particular afternoon, that I saw you on those chapel steps, that you were brave enough to take a chance on a strange rancher with a mad proposal." "It was the best decision I ever made," Zelda said. "You saved me, Owen, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Owen corrected gently. "That is what love does." Autumn came to Montana in a blaze of gold and red. The cattle were moved to lower pastures, the garden was harvested and preserved, and the ranch prepared for winter. On a particularly beautiful October morning, Zelda came to Owen with news that made his heart soar. "I think I am pregnant," she said, her eyes bright with joy and nervousness. "I am not completely certain yet, but all the signs are there." Owen swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure happiness. "A baby! We are going to have a baby! You are happy about this?" Zelda asked, though her smile said she already knew the answer. "Happy. Zelda, I am beyond happy. I am overwhelmed. I am terrified. I am absolutely thrilled. This is everything I wanted but was afraid to hope for." Martha confirmed the pregnancy a week later, and by her calculation, the baby would arrive in late April or early May. The entire ranch seemed to glow with excitement. Tom and Jack built a cradle in secret, presenting it shyly to Zelda one afternoon. Martha passed along her own baby clothes and blankets, carefully preserved from when her own children were small. Owen found himself talking to the baby through Zelda's still flat stomach, telling stories about the ranch and the horses, and promising to teach the child everything he knew. Winter arrived hard and cold, but the ranch house was warm and cozy. Zelda nested, arranging and rearranging the small room they had designated as the nursery, sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Owen watched her with love and amazement, still hardly believing this was his life. On Christmas Eve, they sat before the fire, Zelda knitting yet another baby blanket and Owen reading aloud from a book of poetry. Snow fell softly outside, and the world felt peaceful and perfect. "I have something for you," Owen said, setting aside the book. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." Zelda opened the box to find a delicate gold locket on a chain. Inside was a tiny photograph of Owen on one side and space for a photograph of their child on the other. "Owen, it is beautiful," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Help me put it on." He clasped it around her neck and she touched it gently. "I have something for you too," she said. "It is not a physical gift, but it is important to me that you know it. Owen, I loved you before, but carrying our child has deepened that love into something I do not even have words for. You have given me a family, a home, a purpose, and a future. You have shown me what it means to be truly cherished. I want our child to grow up seeing the kind of love we have, the kind of partnership we have built. You are the best man I have ever known, and I am so grateful that I get to spend my life with you." Owen pulled her close, mindful of the baby between them. "I love you so much," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You and this little one are everything to me. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you both know how precious you are." The winter passed slowly. Zelda grew round and seemed to glow with health. Owen hovered anxiously, prompting her to laugh at his overprotectiveness. He refused to let her lift anything heavy, worried when she was on her feet too long, and checked on her constantly. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she teased one afternoon when he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that could not have weighed more than 5 pounds. "Indulge me," Owen said. "This is my first time becoming a father. I am entitled to be a little ridiculous." "A little," Zelda laughed. "Owen, yesterday you nearly had heart failure when I stepped off the porch too quickly. But I will indulge you because it comes from love." As March melted into April, Zelda slowed down, her movements more careful, her energy focused inward. Martha checked on her daily now, making sure everything was progressing as it should. Owen worked close to the house, unwilling to be far away. The baby came on a warm evening in late April, just as the sun was setting. Owen paced in the main room while Martha and Tom's daughter attended Zelda. Her laboring cries tore at his heart and he felt helpless and terrified. But finally, after hours that felt like years, he heard a new sound. A baby's lusty cry. Martha emerged with a tired smile. "You have a son," she said. "A big healthy boy, and Zelda is doing fine. She wants to see you." Owen entered the bedroom to find Zelda propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a small bundle, and when Owen approached, she pulled back the blanket to show him their son. The baby had dark hair like his mother and what looked like blue eyes, though Owen knew they might change. He was perfect, from his tiny fingers to his small nose to the way he yawned and snuggled against Zelda's chest. "Owen, meet your son," Zelda said softly. "What should we name him?" Owen sat carefully on the bed, reaching out to touch the baby's impossibly soft cheek. "I was thinking about Oliver after my father, but only if you like it." "Oliver Fletcher," Zelda said, trying it out. "I love it. Hello, Oliver. Welcome to the world, little one." Over the following weeks, Owen discovered a capacity for love he had not known he possessed. Oliver was a good baby, healthy and strong, and watching Zelda with their son made Owen fall even more deeply in love with his wife. She was patient and tender, singing soft songs as she nursed him, spending hours just watching him sleep. The ranch hands were equally smitten. Tom carved wooden toys, Jack offered to walk the baby whenever he was fussy, and Martha provided endless wisdom and support. The ranch felt like a true home now, filled with the sounds of a baby's cries and coos, full of life and love. As spring turned to summer, Oliver grew and thrived. He smiled at his parents, began reaching for toys, and showed signs of the strong personality he would develop. Owen carried him around the ranch in a sling Zelda had made, introducing him to the horses and cattle and land that would one day be his heritage. "Can you believe it has only been a year?" Zelda said one evening as they sat on the porch, Oliver asleep between them in his cradle. "1 year ago today I was sitting on chapel steps thinking my life was over, and now look at us. A family. A real family." "Best decision I ever made," Owen said, stopping to help a woman in distress. "Best decision I ever made," Zelda countered, agreeing to marry a stranger. They smiled at each other, the kind of deep, knowing smile that comes from shared history and genuine love. The years passed in the way they do on a working ranch, each season bringing its own rhythms and challenges. Oliver was joined by a sister when he was 2, a tiny girl they named Olive, and 2 years after that by another boy they named Oscar. The ranch house rang with laughter and the sound of running feet. Owen expanded the house, adding bedrooms and a larger kitchen, making space for their growing family. Zelda became known throughout the area as a skilled horse trainer, with people bringing their problem animals from miles away for her calm, patient touch. Owen's cattle operation prospered, and together they built the ranch into one of the most successful in the territory. But more than their professional success, they built a true partnership, based on trust and respect and deep abiding love. Tom and Martha's children grew up alongside the Fletcher children, and Jack eventually married a schoolteacher from Utica, bringing her to live in a new house they built on ranch land Owen gave them as a wedding gift. The ranch became a community, bound together by shared work and mutual care. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen and Zelda made the journey back to Utica to visit the chapel where their life together had begun. It was a warm day in May, and they left the children with Martha for a rare day alone together. The chapel looked exactly the same, and Reverend Hutchins, now grayer but still sharp-eyed, greeted them with delight. "I have married many couples in my years," he said, "but yours is still one of my favorites. The strangest circumstances, perhaps, but look what came of it. 3 beautiful children, a successful ranch, and 2 people who clearly adore each other. I would say God's hand was in that meeting, no matter how unconventional it was." "I believe you are right," Zelda said, "though I confess at the time I thought I was simply making a practical decision. I had no idea I was actually finding my soulmate." They stood together on the chapel steps where Owen had first seen Zelda, looking out at the town that had unknowingly given them their beginning. "You ever think about what might have happened if you had not been in town that day?" Zelda asked. "Or if you had ridden past without stopping?" "I try not to," Owen said honestly. "It makes me feel sick to think about you alone and scared, about me going back to that empty ranch. I prefer to believe that somehow, someway we were meant to find each other. That all the pain and loneliness before was just the path leading us to that moment." "I believe that too," Zelda said. "And I am grateful every day for your kindness, for your courage in making that mad proposal. You gave me everything I did not even know I needed." They kissed on those chapel steps, 10 years after their hasty wedding, with a decade of shared life behind them and a future full of promise ahead. The years continued to unfold. Oliver grew tall and strong like his father, with a gift for understanding animals and land. Olive was clever and quick, always reading and asking questions, planning to become a teacher like Jack's wife. Oscar was the adventurous one, always climbing trees and getting into harmless mischief, keeping his parents on their toes. Owen and Zelda aged together gracefully, their love deepening with every passing season. They still worked side by side on the ranch, though increasingly they were training the next generation to take over. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, now watching their children play where they had once watched the sunset alone together. When Montana became a state in 1889, the family celebrated together, part of the community that had built a territory into something greater. The ranch continued to prosper, now one of the anchors of the local economy, providing jobs and stability for dozens of families. On their 20th anniversary, Owen presented Zelda with a gift that made her cry. It was a painting, commissioned from a traveling artist, showing the chapel in Utica exactly as it had looked that day in 1876. On the steps sat a solitary figure in a wedding dress, and approaching on horseback was a lone cowboy. The painting captured that moment of possibility, that instant when both their lives had changed forever. "So we never forget," Owen said as Zelda stared at the painting with tears streaming down her face. "So our children and grandchildren will know the story of how we found each other." "As if we could ever forget," Zelda said. But she hung the painting in a place of honor in their home, and indeed it became a touchstone for their family's story. Oliver married at 23, bringing home a sweet-natured woman named Emma who fit into the ranch family as though she had always been there. Their first child, a boy they named Owen after his grandfather, arrived a year later, and Owen Fletcher Sr. found himself a grandfather at 53. Holding his grandson, seeing his own name carried forward, feeling the weight of legacy and love and continuity, Owen felt a completeness that was almost overwhelming. "We did it," he whispered to Zelda that night as they lay in the bed they had shared for 25 years. "We built something real, a family, a legacy, everything my mother hoped for." "We did," Zelda agreed. "From the most unlikely beginning, we built something beautiful." Olive became a teacher as she had planned, though she stayed close to home, teaching in Utica's growing school system. She married a banker, a steady, quiet man who adored her spirit and intelligence. Oscar, true to his adventurous nature, spent several years traveling before returning to the ranch, ready to settle down and bring his worldly perspective to the family business. As they entered their 60s, Owen and Zelda slowly stepped back from the day-to-day running of the ranch, letting Oliver and Oscar take over while they enjoyed the role of advisors and grandparents. Their house was frequently filled with grandchildren, and Zelda taught them all to ride while Owen told them stories of the old days, of Montana Territory before statehood, of building a ranch from scratch, of finding love in the most unexpected way. On a soft summer evening in 1901, 25 years after their wedding, Owen and Zelda sat on the porch as they had thousands of times before. Their children were grown and settled, their grandchildren healthy and thriving, their ranch successful beyond anything Owen had dreamed of as a lonely bachelor. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Zelda asked, taking Owen's hand. "You said you thought maybe we could save each other." "I remember," Owen said. "I meant it even though I barely knew you." "You were right," Zelda said. "We did save each other, but more than that, we built something neither of us could have built alone. Every good thing in my life came from saying yes to you that day. Every joy, every triumph, every precious moment with our children and grandchildren. It all traces back to your kindness, to your willingness to take a chance on a stranger. My life began the day I saw you on those chapel steps," Owen said. "Everything before was just preparation, just marking time until I found you. You are the best part of me, Zelda. You always have been." They watched the sun set over the valley they had claimed together, their hands clasped, their hearts full. Around them, the ranch they had built hummed with life. In the barn, Oliver was checking on a mare about to foal. In the garden, Oliver's wife, Emma, was picking vegetables for dinner with two of the grandchildren helping. In the distance, Oscar was riding the fence line, making sure everything was secure for the night. "We made a good life," Zelda said softly. "The best life," Owen agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Montana sky. From the house came the sound of laughter, of family gathered around a table, of the life they had created from one moment of courage and kindness on a spring day in 1876. Owen thought back to that lonely man he had been, riding into Utica with no thought beyond supplies and solitude. He thought about seeing Zelda on those chapel steps, about the recognition that had struck his heart, about the mad proposal that had changed everything. He thought about their wedding in candlelight, about learning to love each other through daily kindness and shared work, about the children they had raised and the legacy they were leaving. "Thank you," he said to Zelda, his voice full of emotion even after all these years. "For what?" She asked, though her smile said she understood. "For saying yes, for taking a chance, for building this life with me, for loving me even when I was foolish or stubborn, for being exactly who you are, for everything." Zelda leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together as they had for 25 years, as they would for whatever years remained to them. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that unlikely beginning. Inside, Emma called them to dinner and they rose to join their family. But before they went in, Owen pulled Zelda close and kissed her, the way he had on countless evenings, the way he hoped to for countless more. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Zelda replied. "My lonely rancher who stopped to help a woman in distress. My husband, my partner, my love." They went inside to the warmth and light and laughter of family, to the life they had built together, to the legacy that would endure long after they were gone. From the chapel steps in Utica to this ranch house full of love, their journey had been extraordinary. And it all began with a moment of compassion, a leap of faith, and two lonely hearts brave enough to reach for happiness when it was offered. The years continued to bless them. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, their house bursting with love and life. They watched Oscar marry and start his own family, adding more grandchildren to the growing Fletcher clan. They saw Oliver take the ranch to new heights of success, modernizing while still honoring the traditions Owen and Zelda had established. When Owen turned 70, the whole community came together for a celebration. The ranch hosted a gathering of friends and neighbors from across the territory, now state. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and speeches honoring Owen and Zelda's contributions not just to their family but to the whole region. Watching it all, Owen felt almost overcome with gratitude. The lonely rancher who had ridden into Utica that day so long ago could never have imagined this abundance of connection and love. Zelda remained the light of his life. Even as they aged, even as her hair went silver and his movements slowed, the love between them never dimmed. They still held hands on the porch, still shared private jokes and knowing glances, still made each other laugh until they cried. "You know," Zelda said one evening as they watched their grandchildren play in the yard, "I used to wonder why Richard Chambers abandoned me. I used to think there must have been something wrong with me, some flaw he saw that made me unworthy. But now I understand. It had nothing to do with me. He was simply a small, cruel man who could not recognize value when he saw it, and his leaving made space for something infinitely better. It brought me to you. His loss was my gain," Owen said firmly, "and I have spent 28 years being grateful for his stupidity." 28 years, Zelda mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. I cannot even remember what it felt like to be that scared woman on the chapel steps. That person seems like a stranger now." "You were never a stranger," Owen said. "Even in that first moment I felt like I knew you, like I recognized you." "Soul recognition," Zelda said. "That is what Martha calls it. She says some people are meant to find each other, and when they do, their souls recognize the connection even before their minds understand it." "Then my soul is very wise," Owen said with a smile, "because it brought me to you." As the evening shadows lengthened, they watched Oliver and Emma's oldest children helping the younger ones with their ranch chores, passing down knowledge and responsibility to the next generation. Oscar and his wife were discussing plans for expanding the horse breeding program, using techniques Zelda had pioneered years ago. Olive's children were visiting for the summer, filling the house with energy and questions and joy. "This is what I dreamed of," Owen said quietly. "When I was alone here after my parents died, I used to imagine the house full of family, full of life. But the reality is so much better than anything I could have imagined. You gave me this, Zelda. You and your courage and your love. We gave each other this," Zelda corrected gently. "That has always been our strength. We built this together as partners, as equals. That is what has made it so strong." As the years rolled on toward the turn of the century, Owen and Zelda continued to be the heart of their family. They told stories of the old days, maintained traditions, and created new ones. They danced at their grandchildren's weddings and held their great-grandchildren with wonder. They saw the world change around them, with automobiles beginning to appear and electricity reaching even remote ranches, but the core of their life remained constant: love, family, land, and partnership. On their 35th anniversary, Zelda gave Owen a leather-bound journal. Inside, in her careful handwriting, she had recorded their story from beginning to end. Every important moment, every challenge overcome, every joy celebrated. She had included drawings of the ranch, pressed flowers from her garden, photographs of their children and grandchildren. "So the story is never forgotten," she said as Owen paged through it with tears in his eyes. "So everyone who comes after us knows how this all began. With a lonely rancher and an abandoned woman, and a preacher who married them that very hour. With faith that sometimes the most unusual paths lead to the most beautiful destinations." Owen pulled her close, holding her as preciously as he had on their wedding night, as he had through 35 years of marriage. "You are my great adventure," he told her. "My great love, my great blessing. Every day with you has been a gift." They lived to see the new century dawn, to see their great-grandchildren begin their own journeys into adulthood, to see the ranch they had built become a true dynasty. When Owen was 78 and Zelda was 75, they took one last trip to Utica, to the chapel where it had all begun. Reverend Hutchins was long gone, but the building remained, now a historical landmark. They stood on the steps where their lives had changed, holding hands and remembering. "I would do it all again," Zelda said. "Every moment exactly as it was." "So would I," Owen agreed. "Even the hard parts, because they led here. To this moment, to this life, to us." They kissed on those chapel steps one more time. Two elderly people with a lifetime of love behind them. And in that kiss was everything they had built together, everything they had become to each other, everything they had created from one improbable beginning. Owen passed peacefully in his sleep at 83, with Zelda holding his hand, and his children and grandchildren gathered around. His last words were of love for his family and gratitude for the life he had lived. Zelda mourned him deeply, but not bitterly, knowing they had been given more years and more love than most people dreamed of. She lived 3 more years, spending her time with her growing family, tending her beloved horses and sitting on the porch where she and Owen had spent so many evenings together. When she joined him, it was in the same peaceful way, surrounded by love, at peace with a life well lived. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple marker that read, Owen Fletcher, 1846–1929, and Zelda Fletcher, 1849–1932. Beloved parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, together forever, but their real legacy was not in the stone marker. It was in the thriving ranch that bore their name, in the descendants who carried their values and their stories forward, in the community they had helped build and strengthen. It was in the painting that still hung in the ranch house, showing a lonely rancher approaching a chapel where a woman waited, neither knowing that they were about to find everything they had been searching for. Their great-granddaughter, named Zelda after her, often stood before that painting and told her own children the story about how love can come from the most unexpected places, how courage and kindness can change everything, how two people who started as strangers became soulmates. She told them about the preacher who married them that very hour, about building a life from scratch, about partnership and perseverance and profound love. And so the story lived on, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the extraordinary beauty that can bloom from the simplest act of stopping to help someone in need. Owen and Zelda's love story, which began on chapel steps in 1876, continued to inspire and guide their family long after they were gone, proving that the best love stories are not the ones that start perfectly, but the ones where two people choose each other every day and build something lasting together. The ranch continued to prosper under the care of their descendants, but it was more than a business. It was a living memorial to what Owen and Zelda had created, not just in land and livestock, but in values and vision. Every decision made honored their legacy. Every grandchild who learned to ride did so with techniques Zelda had developed. Every business deal was conducted with the honesty Owen had insisted on. The Fletcher name became synonymous with integrity, quality, and family in Montana, and it all traced back to that improbable wedding in a small chapel long ago. Their story became legend in the area, told and retold with wonder and warmth. The lonely rancher who had offered marriage to a desperate stranger, the abandoned bride who had been brave enough to say yes, the preacher who had married them that very hour, seeing something in their unusual request that spoke of providence. And the love that had grown from such unlikely soil, flourishing into something that touched hundreds of lives across generations. It was, in the end, a perfect love story. Not perfect because it was easy or conventional, but perfect because it was real. Two flawed people who had found each other in a moment of need and had chosen, every day thereafter, to love and honor and support each other. Two people who had built something lasting from nothing but hope and hard work. Two people who had proven that sometimes the best beginnings are the unexpected ones, and that true love is not about finding the perfect person, but about building a perfect partnership with the person you choose. And so their story ended not with sorrow but with celebration. The celebration of a long life well lived, of love deeply felt and faithfully maintained, of family nurtured and legacy secured. Owen and Zelda Fletcher had started with nothing but each other, and had built an empire of love that would endure for generations. It was more than they had dreamed of on that uncertain evening when they had stood before Reverend Hutchins and pledged their lives to each other. It was everything.